Hello there, and welcome to my eccentric academy. My name is Cademan David, and in this video I'm going to walk you through my favoriteest TV shows in all the known universes. Let's go. So I couldn't bring myself to really necessarily put these TV shows in order. Instead, I'm just going to throw out some TV shows that I really like. And you can tell me if you also enjoy these TV shows. The first TV show I want to bring up is one I've talked about before on this YouTube channel and hope to talk about more if I ever get a chance. And that, of course, is Star Trek Next Generation. Now, Star Trek Next Generation has a bit of a soft spot in my heart because it was one of the first TV shows I remember watching with my family as a family movie night TV show. And that was really cool. But as I got older, I just learned to appreciate the show more and more. I appreciate the philosophical elements as well as just the world that they built and the cultures they made. If you've never seen TNG and you want to, the first season is a little rough to get into. And even later seasons are a little bit rough too. It is very much a product of its time. However, I think if you can learn to appreciate it, is well worth it. Now, the next show I want to bring up, and this should be a surprise to none of you, but Doctor Who. Now, Doctor Who has a bit of a reputation as a bit of a silly show. And fair enough, a lot of it is quite silly. But also, the best episodes of Doctor Who get a little bit philosophical. You have episodes like Dalek and Into the Dalek with the question of, is it worth becoming a monster to defeat the monster?
If you want orders, follow this one. Kill yourself. The Daleks have failed! Why don't you finish the job and make the Daleks extinct? Rid the universe of your filth! Why don't you just die?
You would make a good Dalek.
And all this set around a character, at least in New Who, trying to deal with survivor's guilt, being the last of his kind. And the mythology in at least the Eccleston David Tennant era of the show is just so interesting. Now, as the show would go on, it seemingly lost that intrigue in the mythology more and more, but those first two Doctors of New Who definitely have some very interesting mythology well worth biting into. Now, another show that shouldn't be any surprise to you if you know me or have watched other videos on this channel is The Twilight Zone.
The Twilight Zone.
The Twilight Zone is interesting because to me, it's the first show I've seen that is a philosophical science fiction show, but not ashamed of the fact that it's trying to get you to think. Even Star Trek, which is known for being a very thoughtful show, sort of disguises that more than the Twilight Zone does. And I'm often, when watching episodes of the Twilight Zone, I find myself delightfully surprised at how well the show actually holds up. Now, of course, there is an amount of it that you're going to have to realize it was from a different time, but a lot of the stories still hold up, and even more so, a lot of the philosophy behind the stories holds up. A lot of people look back at the show, and they see a scary show, or they see a show that's about weird science fiction stuff, and those things are in the show, but it's very minute to the idea that the show is about ideas and philosophy. even the way Rod Serling describes the Twilight Zone in the opening, it sounds like what the Twilight Zone is it's actually a world of ideas.
A dimension of mind. You're moving into a land of both shadow and substance, of things and ideas. You've just crossed over into the Twilight Zone.
And a world of thought. And that's what makes the show so interesting, is that it's a show that really wants to be about philosophy and politics, but when Rod Serling was told he couldn't make that show, he said, "Oh, okay, I'm going to make a show about horror and science fiction." Wink, wink. Nonetheless, there's just so many good ideas in the show, and it's well worth a watch. Highly recommend. Now, the next show I'm about to bring up is a show that really shouldn't work on paper. Nothing about the show seems like something I would like. And that show is The Orville. The Orville is my favorite Star Trek show. And yeah, I know it's not actually a Star Trek show, but I honestly think that The Orville does Star Trek better than most Star Trek. Certainly better than anything recent that has called itself Star Trek. Now, if you don't know, The Orville was a science fiction TV show made by Seth MacFarlane, who famously created Family Guy and other degenerate animated projects. And while there is a bit of crude humor in The Orville, the show itself is actually very thoughtful and very well done. It's not really a parody of Star Trek. It's more of just a riff on Star Trek. And ultimately, it's really cool to get a show that actually gets the ideas and philosophies of Star Trek in an era where most Star Trek shows are just trying to be cyberpunk Game of Thrones. And honestly, a lot of the humor in the Orville show does actually land for me, though not all of it. So depending on your sense of humor, the humor may or may not land for you, but as the show goes on, it creates more and more intriguing, interlocked storylines. And by the end of the show, at least in my heart, it has earned its place among the truly great science fiction shows, along with TNG and Doctor Who. Now, the next show on my list is the show Supernatural. And I remember when I first started watching Supernatural, and I thought, oh, this is really interesting, because this show is just doing the science fiction concepts that I love, except we're putting them in a supernatural environment instead of a science fiction environment. Now, of course, if you do watch the show, I do recommend stopping at the end of the first big story arc, where Sam and Dean prevent the apocalypse from happening. But up until that point, at least for the main part, the show is very enjoyable. The dynamic between the two brothers is really interesting, and in the show, a lot of characters die, and a lot of characters that you kind of grow to like end up dying, and a lot of them don't even come back. So it's kind of refreshing to have a TV show that will actually let you feel sad for the death of a character you really liked. But ultimately, what I think is the most interesting part of the show is just the overall mythology and world building. Of course, there's contradictions within the world building, but it is really cool just this sort of cosmic rules they have on their angels, demons, and monsters of all sorts. So if you're looking for a good sort of spooky TV show with interesting world building, but also one that feels very science fiction in its storylines, I would highly recommend Supernatural. But again, stop after that first big story arc. Now this next show is actually one that's coming out right now, and that show is Invincible. When I was younger, I loved the show of Young Justice. As I've gotten older, there's a lot of sort of plot holes and stuff that kind of bother me about the show, but I really liked the world building and the interesting characters in Young Justice. And I feel like Invincible is almost like Young Justice if it actually held up for me. The show, if you do not know what the show is, it's sort of like a riff on Superman and Spider-Man in a way. It's basically like evil Superman's son is something like the concept of the show. And if you're like me, you're probably thinking, oh no, not another evil Superman. But this evil Superman is complicated. He is enormously complicated. And the show isn't like The Boys, where it's like trying to throw shade at the superhero genre. Instead, it's a show that loves the superhero genre and is something of a love letter to the superhero genre. If you grew up on superhero cartoons, then I highly recommend the Invincible cartoon, which you can watch on Amazon Prime. Now, I wanted to put a animated show on this list, and there is a lot of animated superhero TV shows I watched that I think everyone should watch and were highly influential on the way it tells stories, but the one that I decided to go with for this list is Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes. At least the first season. The second season you can take or leave, but the first season does such a good job of just setting up an interesting Marvel animated universe that they could have made hundreds of spin-off shows in. This era of superhero cartoons was definitely the best. It was sort of that sweet spot where cartoons were for everyone, not just kids, which for some reason we've moved away from now, with modern superhero cartoons that I'm not even sure children would want to watch. Nonetheless, we aren't talking about those shows, we're talking about this wonderful Avengers show that I love very much. One of the best things about this show is the season 0, which is, I believe, three or four episodes, each following a different member of the Avengers before they come together and actually form the team in episode 1 of season 1. And it's just done really well. Even better than how the MCU did it, I would argue. Where you see an episode about Captain America in World War II, but it plants the seeds for Thor. And then you have an episode about Hulk, where we get maybe the most interesting version of that character that's ever been on a TV screen. But also we get the introduction of my boy Hawkeye in Black Widow, and all of the plot points that are started in the season 0 continue on into the show. It was something I watched as a kid, and I got really excited about it. But when I look back now, it's not hard to see why I got excited. So if you're the kind of guy who likes superhero cartoons, definitely give Earth's Mightiest Heroes a watch. With that being said, thank you so much for watching. If you want to hear me talk about individual episodes of Doctor Who, I've been reviewing all of them. That playlist is right there. You can click on it with your mouse. Thank you so much for watching. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, check out those other Doctor Who reviews, and don't forget to brush your teeth.